One by one, territories joined together, creating a patchwork nation of 50 different states, united, but each with its own history, spirit, culture, and landmarks. Let's explore the history of 5 of them: Texas, Massachusetts, Arkansas, Iowa, and Delaware. Welcome to the States. Before Davy Crockett fought and died in this state, he served 3 terms as a Tennessee congressman. But when he left Washington for good, he told his colleagues, "You may all go to hell. I'm going to Texas." Greetings from Texas, the 28th state, which joined the Union on December 29, 1845. Today, it ranks 2nd in population.
I guess sometimes people think that Texans sort of, I don't know, that maybe we're a little rough around the edges, that maybe we sometimes talk too much, that maybe we sometimes brag too much, but the problem is we have so much to brag about. It's hard not to be proud of Texas.
The Lone Star flag first flew over Texas when it was an independent republic from 1836 to 1845. Why just the one star?
Under Mexico, Texas had been attached to the state of Coahuila, so it had been Coahuila and Texas. And its flag had 2 stars. So when independence came, the Texas flag had 1 to show the split.
Texans like to boast, and they'll be the first to tell you that their state was once its very own country.
They often forget the fact that it wasn't Texas's idea that Texas should be an independent nation. It was simply the fact that the United States wouldn't accept Texas and made Texas wait on the outside.
They may be a little murky on the history, but Texans love their state like nowhere else.
Just as proud as I can be, I guess. They say, "Where are you from?" When I go anywhere, I don't say from the United States, I say I'm from Texas.
Part of that Texas pride comes from its size.
And we just kind of think big because we are big.
Bigger smiles, bigger margaritas.
Larger families, larger crowds.
Texas has a big heart.
When Texas was admitted to the Union, there was a general supposition that, in fact, it would be divided into several states. It was something of a surprise that it wasn't, and Texans got used to the idea that their state was going to be bigger than all the others, and it was something of a blow when Alaska was admitted to the Union. Texans took 2nd place, didn't take it very well.
One aspect of Texas being so large is that there's a tremendous variety of climate, from humid pine forests in the east to the Chihuahuan deserts in the west, the Stake Plains. They'll drove people crazy because there were no trees and it was flat as a tabletop.
We also have Gulf Coast and the Texas Hill Country here. We have a variety of just about everything.
Much of Texas is defined by its border with Mexico. On the U.S. side, vast numbers of Mexican Americans maintain substantial bonds with Mexico, and they live bicultural and transnational lifestyles to a far greater degree than any other segment of the borderland population.
The Hispanic population in San Antonio is still the majority of the population. And it has helped build this community to what it is today. You'll notice in San Antonio, there's not, this rush like you'd see in New York City or East Coast. But the reality is that, there's other things that are more important to us than just getting it done real quick.
Hispanic immigrant population has contributed greatly to Texas growth. It's the only state to have 3 cities with populations exceeding 1 million: Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio.
Everything's bigger in Texas except the small towns, and that's the best thing about Texas, is definitely the small towns.
People might argue in small-town Texas about politics. They might argue about religion, but they'll all pull together behind the local football team. There's an interesting phenomenon that school districts will often break up the elementary schools. They won't break up the high schools, simply because it would pit one half of the small town against the other half of the town on Friday night.
The Texas Week really starts on Friday night because that's when all the high school football teams play. Saturday is the day that the college teams play, and you have the University of Texas, you have Texas A&M, TCU, all of these major football powers. And then on Sunday, of course, during football season, the Dallas Cowboys and the teams from down in Houston. Texans really love their sports.
There may be only one other subject that can fire up a Texan like football: barbecue. Busby's Barbecue in Bandera, Texas is among the dozens of eateries claiming to have the best barbecue in the state.
Yeah, it's called a Southern Fried Cooker. It holds about 700 pounds of meat.
There are many people who consider any form of sauce to be sacrilegious. It's simply smoke.
We use green oak. It's not dry, so that it smokes an awful lot, and where you get your flavor to the meat is with the wood.
There are people who will spend years perfecting their barbecue technique, some who will share with others, hand it down in the family, others who will take it to the grave.
All Texans like their barbecue hot, but their coolest city's got to be Austin.
I moved to Austin as soon as I could because Austin's kind of like a cultural oasis in all of Texas.
Big music town, tons of clubs, tons of bands come through here, and a lot of blues. And that's still here, it's still huge. But now Austin's kind of got a huge variety of music.
The U.S. history in Texas really began when Mexico invited groups of Americans to settle in the empty plains. 10 years later, many of those same settlers turned against their hosts and fought for independence.
And they outnumbered the Mexicans living in Texas by probably 5 or 6 to 1. They grew increasingly restive under Mexican law, and they became imbued with the notion that Texas ought to be, well, at least independent and perhaps attached to the United States. In some respects, Texas independence was what you could call a triumph for illegal immigration, because nearly all of the immigrants from the United States had come outside the rules of Mexican immigration law.
After losing San Antonio to the rebellious Texans, Mexican General Santa Anna was determined to retake this key location. In doing so, he believed he could impress upon the Texans the futility of further resistance. The showdown came at an old mission, now known as the Alamo.
Sam Houston never considered the Alamo to be worthy as a military objective. He knew what it was. It was not a fortress.
The Alamo is an inspiring piece of courage and determination. But in terms of military intelligence, no, really the only thing dumber than the decision to defend the Alamo at all costs was Santa Anna's decision to take it at all costs.
46 days after the fall of the Alamo and the death of every defender, including Davy Crockett, General Sam Houston exacted revenge for Texas. His force of 910 militiamen routed 1,300 Mexican soldiers at the Battle of San Jacinto.
He pushed his army 55 miles in 2.5 days through pouring rain and mud and finished him at the Battle of San Jacinto, which only took 18 minutes. It was sort of a surprise attack, but the killing went on the rest of the day. And in fact, the Mexicans lost as many men killed as the Texans had suffered at the Alamo and Goliad and everywhere else through the entire revolution.
31 years later, rancher O.W. Wheeler invented something called the cattle drive. He moved 2,400 steers some 800 miles from San Antonio to the new railroad stockyards in Abilene, Kansas, on what became known as the Chisholm Trail. Guiding the cattle was a new breed of American, the cowboy.
That heyday of the cowboy and the great free-range cattle drives only lasted 15 or 20 years. Because when people figured out how much beef there was and how big the market was, the entire ranching industry became very heavily capitalized by outside money. And then these self-made, very independent cowboys all of a sudden became minimum wage workers.
Now my father, and he was a cowboy and a cowman through and through and through. And he was known as a light rider because a horse would last longer underneath him. He was called by everybody all over the country because he was a light rider.
At the turn of the century, an oil well called Spindletop Well No. 1 near Beaumont, Texas, blew 150 feet into the air for 9 days. It was the greatest oil discovery in U.S. history. Texas had hit the jackpot with the resource that would rule the century. By 1933, oil was so plentiful in the state that it sold for 10 cents a barrel.
Automobiles became relatively common just about the time the Texas oil industry emerged. So Henry Ford unveiled his Model T in 1908. Now this gave a huge new market for petroleum products. But of course, Ford wouldn't have developed his cars if there hadn't been oil, gasoline in particular, available.
They very much were risk takers back then. And the technology is not what we have today. It can't be done on the internet. A computer can't drill a well. You've got to have the same roughnecks. They're doing the same thing on a drilling platform that they've been doing for an awfully long time.
Usually people that are born in Texas die in Texas. That's the way I like to look at it.
I was born here. I was born to this land. I love everything about it. Very independent, just like these cattle.
Well, it's a big place. It's a big state, and it's a place of big dreams. It's a place where things are larger than life and where people are not afraid to make that stretch. Texans have never been afraid to dream.
This next state was founded by religious extremists who did not believe in the separation of church and state. Since those early days, it has evolved into what may be America's most liberal state, leading the way in the abolition of slavery and in support of universal education and health care. Greetings from Massachusetts, one of the original 13 colonies and the 6th state to join the Union. With nearly 6.4 million residents, it ranks number 13 in population.
They say that we don't know how to say our R's, you know, so when we say like ka or ba, it might sound funny to somebody else that's not from the Boston area. But I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just speaking the way I know how to talk.
I really love the Boston accent. My mother, who had been raised in South Boston, she still said mod not and park your car in the Harvard Yard.
The greater Boston area is home to about half of Massachusetts' entire population. 23% of the state's residents claim to be of Irish descent, the highest proportion in the nation. That probably accounts for the 850,000 spectators at the annual St. Patrick's Day Parade.
St. Patrick's Day here in Boston is bigger than in Ireland. Everybody dyes their hair green, orange. St. Patrick's Day is our Mardi Gras.
St. Patrick is celebrated on a single day in March. But around here, there are 82 other sacrosanct days. Each spring and summer, disciples from all of New England make the pilgrimage to America's oldest baseball stadium, Fenway Park, the heart of Red Sox Nation.
The greatest thing about living in Boston is the sports town. The greatest sports fan in the world. Where else can you watch the Red Sox beat the Yankees, get in your car and drive 3 hours to New York and watch the Red Sox beat the Yankees there, too?
In 2004, long-suffering Red Sox fans finally rid themselves of the curse of the Bambino, beating the hated Yankees and winning the World Series. But Massachusetts sports fans need only to look to history to discover their state has been #1 many times. The first subway system in the U.S. opened under the streets of Boston. The world's first basketball game was played in Springfield. The first nuclear-powered surface vessel, the USS Long Beach, was launched at Quincy. And Norfolk County, Massachusetts, is the only American county that can boast of being the birthplace of 4 United States presidents: John Adams, John Quincy Adams, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and George Herbert Walker Bush. The Adamses and the Bushes are among the 8 U.S. presidents that are known to be descended from the passengers of the Mayflower, the ship that brought the Pilgrims to the New World. Massachusetts' immigrant identity dates back to the Plymouth colony in 1620. The Puritans arrived 10 years later. They came not only to escape religious persecution in Europe, but to convert the indigenous heathen peoples to Christianity.
It was quite central to how they understood their mission, and genuinely so. The first seal of Massachusetts depicts pretty much a naked Indian guy standing with pine trees behind him and a kind of a cartoon bubble coming out of his mouth that says, "Come over and help us." "Come over and help us" is the image that Puritans wanted to send about what their mission was, that the Indians were begging for Christ.
It was a bitter misconception. Only a few hundred converted. Many others were willing to risk everything to drive off the proselytizers and destroy their religion.
The Indians' brutality was specifically aimed at Christianity. You can sense their real hostility in the way they fight.
The war was one of the bloodiest and most costly in the history of America. 10% of those who fought were wounded or killed.
The war was devastating for the native population, half of whom were killed or expelled violently or enslaved. So really a disaster from which the population could not recover.
As religious dissenters, young Puritan ministers were forced to sign an act of conformity to the Anglican Church if they desired a degree from the universities of Oxford or Cambridge.
And so they determined to create a university or a college in the New World that would do for their view of the world and of religion what Oxford and Cambridge had been doing, but from their point of view, not very well in the old country.
The newcomers to Massachusetts started America's first university. They called it Harvard.
Well, my father came from North Platte, Nebraska as a 16-year-old boy on a scholarship to Harvard College. And then he decided to go to medical school, went to Harvard Med School, and then became the doctor for the Harvard football team, and also taught at the Harvard Medical School. So his life became very much about Harvard, and most of my boyfriends went to Harvard.
Today, on the campus of this institution, you'll find a famous statue that bears the inscription, John Harvard, founder, 1638. It is also called the Statue of Three Lies. because John Harvard was not the founder, the school was not founded in 1638, and
that man is not John Harvard at all. It's actually Leonard Hoare, the third president of Harvard University. You would think of a place like Harvard, they would get their facts straight.
there can be no serious discussion about Boston without mentioning Boston drivers. It's been said that only two things really count in Boston: arrival and survival.
We think of driving in Boston and Massachusetts as a private contact sport, and the rules are there for others, so there's a certain kind of chaos in the middle of our order.
Just north of Boston lies a community that's a source of pride for all of Massachusetts. The seaside town of Gloucester is renowned for its maritime traditions and the sacrifices made by its fishermen.
If I said that New England was founded on fish, I would be only exaggerating very slightly.
When we say fish, we're talking about codfish. If we want to talk about halibut or haddock, we say what it is. But if someone says fish, it refers to codfish.
Gloucester was America's first major fishing port, as well as an important shipbuilding center. A new type of vessel was introduced here by shipbuilder Andrew Robinson. He called it a schooner.
A schooner is a fore and aft rigged vessel with two or more masts, the forwardmost mast being the shortest. In 1713, Mr. Robinson was launching a boat, and an elderly woman said, "Oh, look how she scoons." And so Mr. Robinson said, "We'll call her a schooner."
Being on a schooner like this is similar to what Gloucester fishermen fished on back in fishing's heyday, where they would go fishing for days, bring their catch aboard, and then return to port.
Over the last 300 years, however, many who fished these waters never returned to port. Gloucester's famous bronze fisherman looks out upon the sea and the names of those the sea has claimed.
These 5,378 names of these fishermen were lost at sea, and here's the kicker: bodies not recovered. And it's just as dangerous today as it was back in the 1800s when fishermen leave this port. They never know if they're going to come back or not.
I have a profound respect for the fishermen, because all of the electronics, the boats, whatever, the hazards are still there. We saw that in the, you saw that in the great movie, The Perfect Storm, the book, Perfect Storm. They had everything, but the sea swallowed them up.
You can't not live in Massachusetts without being aware of history and how our nation was founded, and so it was a wonderful place to grow up.
This next state boasts of plentiful game animals plus a rich and varied fish population. With more than 600,000 acres of lakes, it attracts sportsmen from around the world. Greetings from Arkansas, which became the 25th state on June 15, 1836. Its 2.8 million people make it the 32nd most populous state in the nation.
Oh, I think a lot of the misconceptions about Arkansas is, a lot of people think it's a hick state.
I get so aggravated at people thinking that we're barefooted hillbillies.
We don't wear shoes. Well, I don't wear shoes, actually.
Country jokes are in Arkansas, like you can say, a guy said, "Hey man, you lost a shoe," and he said, "No, I didn't, I found one."
Arkansas was known as the hillbilly state. That's right. And they've lived a lot of that down,
The stereotype of the Ozark hillbilly has been replaced by the image of a state noted for its progressive politics, an outstanding university system, and a strong economy. Arkansas is #1 in poultry production and a leader in rice, cotton, and soybeans. It is also the birthplace of Walmart. It was in Bentonville, Arkansas that Sam Walton pioneered his concept of the no-frills store. Sam achieved huge sales volume by selling products with smaller markups than his competitors. Walmart is now the largest retailer and the second largest corporation in the world, as well as the largest private employer in the United States. But you don't have to be an entrepreneur to strike it rich in Arkansas.
We've got the only diamond mine in the United States in Arkansas.
Located just outside Murfreesboro, Crater of Diamonds State Park invites visitors to become prospectors. You find it, you keep it.
In fact, a few weeks ago, someone found a 2-carat diamond, which she was able to keep, and it's kind of a fun thing to do on the weekends.
The award-winning Arkansas Capitol building, with its neoclassic style, was built on the site of a former state penitentiary. It was here in 1978 that 32-year-old Bill Clinton was sworn in as governor, one of the youngest in American history.
Now that we've produced a president of the United States, that people have realized that there are people in Arkansas who are progressive, educated.
Arkansas also has a tradition of electing many populists to political office, and the Democratic Party has remained stronger in Arkansas than it has in most states throughout the South.
When out-of-staters come to visit Arkansas today, many will stop first at the new Clinton Presidential Library. Then, they'll head straight for the great outdoors. Mark Davis, professional angler, bass master, and local celebrity, knows firsthand about Arkansas's unspoiled waterways.
The reason the anglers from this area are so well versed is because we've got such a wide diversity of waters to fish, from the Arkansas River to Lake Ouachita and all these other lakes. So not every state offers that.
Arkansas is rich in scenic beauty, but much of this land is stained with the blood of war. During the War of Northern Aggression, which is what the Civil War is called down here, Arkansas became a target for both the North and South, thanks to its strategic location on the Mississippi River. More than 750 military engagements were fought in the state, and many heroes emerged. Perhaps none more poignant than 17-year-old David Owen Dodd.
David O. Dodd is known today as the boy martyr of Arkansas. And that is probably because of the way he died.
On December 30th, 1863, Dodd was returning from a business errand for his father when he was stopped at a Union checkpoint.
And David O. Dodd was caught with a memorandum book with a series of dots and dashes, Morse code, detailing the locations and strengths of federal defensive positions in Little Rock.
Dodd was arrested and charged with spying for the Confederacy. 4 days later, he was tried and found guilty.
Because of his youth, there was great sympathy for Dodd, and many hoped that the federal commander, Frederick Steele, would spare his life. Dodd, however, refused to cooperate. He refused to say who, if anyone, had helped him gather this information.
Despite bitter opposition, Dodd was hanged on January 8, 1864, before a crowd of nearly 6,000 citizens and a large military escort brought in to quell potential unrest over the execution.
This was something that really caught the public's attention, and I think also they felt that he was more of a dupe than anything else. There's no indication that he really knew what he was carrying.
The source of Dodd's information is still a mystery. Whether he was acting as an agent for the Confederacy or whether he was working independently, we'll never know the answer to that. The secret of Dodd's accomplice, if in fact there was one, died with David Dodd.
Volunteers still tend Dodd's grave at the Mount Holly Cemetery in Little Rock. Another historic site in Arkansas has earned a very different reputation. Since 1867, people have been coming to hot springs to soak in mineral-rich thermal baths, convinced of their therapeutic value. Building on that success, hot springs branched out to gambling and horse racing, becoming a popular getaway for mobsters. By the 1920s, corruption in hot springs reached legendary proportions. Brothels and casinos were now the main source of its prosperity. Local authorities turned a blind eye, and hot springs became an unofficial sanctuary for organized crime.
There was sort of a truce between the gangsters and the families when they came to Hot Springs.
People like Al Capone, I guess Pretty Boy Floyd, all the names that we can think of from those days. While they were busy killing each other in Chicago, they would take off time and come to Hot Springs to relax.
Hot Springs is now the most popular tourist attraction in the state. 50 years ago, however, Arkansas attracted the national spotlight for far different reasons as the state struggled to achieve racial equality. Central High School in Little Rock became the flashpoint when 9 African-American students tried to enroll. In early 1957, the Little Rock School Board had voted to integrate the school system. Local authorities didn't expect the decision to meet much resistance. They were wrong.
On the evening of Labor Day, before schools were scheduled to open the following morning, Governor Orwell Faubus called out the Arkansas National Guard, and at first he gave them the order that they were to just prevent any violence. But it became clear that in order to prevent violence, his order meant that they should keep out the Little Rock 9 that were attempting to enroll for the first day of class.
Death threats at my home, and my father losing all his work, and my mom being told that she needs to come and identify me at the morgue, and my little brother, who was 3, being threatened. And
The Little Rock Nine tried to enter the school again on September 23rd. Again, they were forced to leave.
National figures, including the president and his aides, witnessed this on national television, and that is one of the reasons that he sent in the 101st Airborne Rangers to give guarded and protected entry to the Little Rock Nine on September 25th, 1957.
When I look at the photographs, and when I try to retrieve those feelings, it's kind of like really bewildered. Lots of confusion.
The students were finally admitted, but they endured a full year of physical and verbal abuse.
And why? Try to help this country? It really was about helping this country be what it said it was. And we're still doing that.
But a lot has changed since 1957. A civil rights museum now stands next door to Central High School. In 1999, each of the Little Rock Nine was awarded the nation's highest civilian honor, the Congressional Gold Medal. In 2005, this monument to the students was unveiled near the state capitol.
I'm encouraged every day by my students who don't think like their parents or their grandparents. And so the more diversity that we have within our state, I pray that that will make us all more accepting, and we are not what we used to be.
Every 4 years, the people of this state gather in homes and schools for a unique political ritual called a caucus. The word comes from a Native American term that means the gathering of tribal elders. Greetings from Iowa, which joined the Union on December 28, 1846, becoming the 29th state. Its population of nearly 3 million ranks it at number 30. If any state can claim to be the heartland of America, it's Iowa, a place where the people pride themselves on their old-fashioned family values.
We didn't have any allowance or votes on what, we ate or what we ate. We ate at 5. If you're late, you're out. By the way, if it was 10 degrees below zero, you still had to play outside. And it was fun.
Iowans are renowned for their common sense, a quality they bring to their governance.
There are 99 counties in Iowa. Each county consists of a varying number of townships, but each township was self-governing, so the fact that neighbors got together and nominated and ran elections was a commonplace thing. It's only in the age of television that the caucuses become famous.
The media frenzy really began in 1976, when an obscure governor from Georgia won the most votes at the Democratic Iowa caucus.
Every Iowan, I think, feels it's their natural right to personally, interrogate any presidential candidate.
We get real tired of political commercials. And after the caucuses, which are usually in January, we can go back to herbicide and pesticide commercials. And we're kind of glad to get back to a rootworm again after some politicians.
Another Iowa innovation was created in the small northern county that gave its name to the ultimate freedom machine, the Winnebago motorhome.
It's a fitting name because the Winnebagos were a group of Indians that moved around a lot. Iowans historically didn't travel a lot, but now do. We flood the southern part of the United States with our retirees in the wintertime.
Geographically, Iowa is unique. It's the only state whose full eastern and western borders are rivers, with the Missouri on one side and the Mississippi on the other. Every year, the Des Moines Register newspaper sponsors a huge bike ride, which goes across the state from river to river.
It takes 7 days, and every day you stop at a little town that may have 400 people, but suddenly there's 15,000 riders there, and they come from all over the world, and I've done it a bunch of times. Lance Armstrong did it last year, and it's the one time of year where Iowa goes crazy.
Although Iowa is known today as one of the most fertile places on Earth, there was a time when people thought that its grasslands would never be productive.
The early settlers had the misconception that the prairie soil was completely infertile because it was just growing grass. It wasn't growing trees. If land can't sustain trees, it's infertile. Really, the opposite is true.
What the settlers found under the grassy prairie turned out to be some of the best soil on the North American continent. They also found the perfect climate for growing what was to become Iowa's #1 cash crop, corn. With an annual output of more than 2 billion bushels, Iowa is the nation's leading producer.
You could be driving with Iowa corn in your fuel tank in the car. You could be consuming it as food. You could be drinking the sweetener in the soft drinks. And you can also be using products made out of plastic that used to be Iowa corn stalks.
The farmlands and rolling hills here inspired a young Iowa artist to try and capture the spirit of the state on canvas. In the years following World War I, Grant Wood was struggling to define a style of painting that would become synonymous with Americana. In 1930, Wood created his masterpiece, one of the most reproduced and recognized paintings in the world. It's called American Gothic. Wood, born on a farm near the tiny town of Anamosa in 1891, painted overseas during most of the 1920s, he ultimately rejected the experimental styles of the European art movements. Later, he was said to have declared, "All the really good ideas I've ever had came to me while I was milking a cow, so I went back to Iowa."
Before that time, there really wasn't an American art form. We kind of followed Europe that, and Grant Wood tried that, and he decided that home was okay.
Well, I think he really felt that there was something very special here in the Midwest, and he refused to go to New York or the other sort of art colonies and live there. He wanted to make his own in Iowa.
Wood worked in relative obscurity until he painted American Gothic in 1930.
The American Gothic painting models supposedly were his dentist and his sister. Without a doubt, it is his sister in it, Nan Wood Graham. For many years, the dentist denied that he was the model for it, but it does look just like him, so I think without a doubt it is.
American Gothic helped inspire a new school of art called American Regionalist. Wood, John Stewart Curry of Kansas, and Missouri's Thomas Hart Benton were its leaders. Grant Wood captured the real Iowa. Its farmers and its fields, its small towns, and the trains rolling through the countryside.
The sound of trains at night coming through Ottumwa, Iowa, where I'm from. The Des Moines River runs right through my hometown, and we have these bridges that if you stand on top, the sun goes down, and then the trains come, and you can hear the whistle, and you realize how great it is. You know, you're there.
This state's government describes itself as business-friendly and accessible. That helps explain why over 50% of Fortune 500 companies are incorporated here. Greetings from Delaware, which became the first state to join the Union on December 7th, 1787. With 853,000 residents, it is America's 45th most populous state.
Delaware is the first state because Delaware was the first state to ratify the Constitution. Now, it probably gets people in Virginia a little upset because they were the first colony, but no, they are not the first state.
Being the first state gives us a certain amount of prestige and ranking where it concerns events of a national scope. I mean, during the presidential inaugurations, for instance, Delaware is always at the front of the parade.
Delaware may be number 1 in the Union, but it's number 49 when it comes to size.
Delaware may be small and may lack the physical attributes of some of our larger states, but without a doubt, we make up for that diminutive size with our business savvy.
Delaware's reputation for making a buck comes in part at the expense of out-of-state drivers just passing through. Although only 24 of I-95's 1,900 miles cross a small corner of northwest Delaware, the state charges two-axle vehicles 13 cents per mile. That's roughly 3 times more than neighboring New Jersey. Delaware's business savvy does not stop at the toll booth. It's not a coincidence that over 300,000 corporations, including half of the Fortune 500, incorporate in this small state. The business-friendly laws governing these companies allow them to be located elsewhere and provide directors and officers with more liability protection for their business decisions.
In most states, there's about 1 incorporation, 1 business entity for every 20 people. In the state of Delaware, by the end of this decade, there will be 1 business entity for every person in Delaware.
I don't mind the corporations here. It keeps our taxes down. We have no sales tax here, so that means when you see $1.99, it really is $1.99.
Delaware may seem serious about its business, but it's even more serious about the state delicacy.
For people who've never eaten a Delaware blue claw crab,
they don't know what they're missing. These come straight from the boats and the watermen that get them out of the bay.
Wilmington, Delaware has the distinction of being the birthplace of the first self-governing black church in America. The African Union Church was founded by Reverend Peter Spencer more than 40 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. A year later, the church began hosting an annual festival that continues to this day, the Big August Quarterly.
It was wonderful religious celebration. A lot of good preaching, a lot of good singing, and a lot of good food, And let me tell you something else about the Big Quarterly. It is the oldest continuous African-American festivals in the United States.
The celebration of the Big Quarterly has become an important part of state lore. But when it comes to Delaware history, nothing quite beats the story of Caesar Rodney, who, like Paul Revere, was famous for a midnight ride.
If there is an individual who earned or could carry the title of Mr. Delaware, it would be Caesar Rodney.
On June 30th, 1776, a motion for independence had been put forward in Philadelphia. But when the votes of all the colonies were counted, they were shy by just one vote. Delaware's 2 delegates split their vote. So Caesar Rodney, the 3rd delegate, was summoned to break the tie.
So Caesar Rodney dropped whatever he was doing, jumped on his horse, and rode overnight up to Philadelphia through thunder and lightning and rain, to get to Philadelphia on time. And he burst into the Independence Hall and said, "I cast my ballot for independence." And that put Delaware over the top.
Caesar Rodney had the misfortune of passing away soon after the Revolution. Without a doubt, his prominence leading up till that point would have given him a role in the early nationhood that would make him much better remembered today.
DuPont, on the other hand, is a name known around the world. Its founder was a French miller named DuPont, who came to America in 1799 after the French Revolution. The company line has it that when DuPont's gunpowder fizzled while on a hunting trip, he became determined to make a more reliable blend. DuPont went on to become America's #1 manufacturer of gunpowder. At his mill, the heavy machinery was powered by the rushing waters of the Brandywine River. The willow trees on the riverbank made excellent charcoal, a key ingredient in black powder. Stone grinding wheels were used to avoid sparks that would ignite the explosive powder. The product made here was potent.
If I put the powder in a cannon and put a 25-pound cannonball in front of it, 1 ounce of powder will throw a 25-pound cannonball 250 yards. That powder is so explosive, it will throw that way out.
During the Civil War, DuPont chose principle over profit by not honoring contracts with southern states that seceded from the Union. The company went on to become the largest supplier of powder to the U.S. government, averaging more than 1 million pounds per year. DuPont also produced 40% of the smokeless gunpowder used by the Allies in World War I. And dynamite developed by DuPont was used to construct the Panama Canal.
The whole development of the infrastructure of the early United States required blasting powder. And DuPont powders were considered among the best and were widely used.
In the 1900s, the DuPont company expanded its non-explosive products, inventing and manufacturing a wide range of chemicals, dyes, and synthetic materials.
DuPont in the 20th century became a company based on science and technology and industrial research. Among its great inventions was nylon, for example, and other products like Kevlar that are in use today.
Despite Delaware's enormous contribution to this nation for over 200 years, it seems that it is still overlooked by the rest of the country.
Without a doubt, we've had somewhat of an identity crisis. And one of the beautiful things about living in Delaware is that you have a regular opportunity to educate folks who don't live here about Delaware and its people and its culture.